I caught my husband lying just once, and it blew up 6 lives, 2 careers, and a $10 million fraud ring. But let me back up, because you need to understand something about me first. I'm not the kind of woman who sees red flags. I see red roses. I see passion where others see possession. I see mystery where others see manipulation. My therapist says it's because I grew up reading too many romance novels, but I think it's simpler than that. I just wanted to be loved by someone who looked at me like I hung the moon. And for 2 years, Marcus did exactly that. The first time I met Marcus Wellington, he was bleeding on my doorstep at 2 a.m. Not metaphorically. Actually bleeding. My golden retriever Daisy had gone ballistic, barking like the house was on fire, and when I stumbled to the door in my silk nightgown, there he was. 6'2" of pure muscle in a torn Armani suit, clutching his side. "Please," he gasped. "I just need to use your phone. There was an accident. I should have called 911. Should have kept the chain on the door. Should have done literally anything except let a bleeding stranger into my house at 2 a.m. But those eyes, God, those emerald green eyes looked at me like I was his salvation." "See what happened?" I asked, already pulling him inside. Daisy whimpered and retreated to her bed, tail between her legs. I should have paid attention to that. Dogs know things we don't. "Hit and run," he managed, collapsing onto my cream leather couch. "They came out of nowhere. My phone's dead and yours was the first house with lights on." I played nurse that night, cleaned his wounds, called him an Uber to the hospital, even gave him my number in case he needed a witness statement. He texted me the next morning with a photo of his bandaged ribs and a message that made my stomach flip. "My guardian angel, dinner tomorrow, I owe you my life." That's how it started. With blood and lies and my dog cowering in the corner. But I didn't see it then. All I saw was the way he showed up the next night with 24 roses and reservations at the most exclusive restaurant in the city. The way he pulled out my chair and ordered wine in perfect French. The way he told me I was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen and somehow made it sound like he'd never said those words before. "Tell me about yourself," I said over the candlelight, already half in love. "I work in international finance," he said smoothly.
Boring stuff, really?
"Mergers, acquisitions. I travel a lot for work." He leaned forward, those green eyes locked on mine.
Boring stuff?
"But I'd rather hear about you. What makes a woman open her door to a stranger at 2 a.m.? Stupidity?" I laughed. "Compassion," he corrected, reaching across the table to take my hand. "Pure beautiful compassion. It's rare these days." By dessert I was gone. By the third date we were sleeping together. By month 3 he'd moved into my downtown loft. Daisy still wouldn't go near him, always finding excuses to be in whatever room he wasn't. But I wrote it off as jealousy. She'd been my only companion for 3 years since my ex-fiancé had cheated. Of course she was territorial. Marcus was everything my ex wasn't. Attentive, romantic, successful. He'd surprise me with weekend trips to Napa, show up at my marketing firm with lunch just because, leave notes on my pillow when he traveled for work. Which was often. Sometimes 2-3 times a month. "I hate leaving you," he'd whisper against my neck the night before each trip. "But this deal in Hong Kong, it's going to set us up for life, baby. Trust me." I did trust him, even when my best friend Natalie raised her eyebrows at how secretive he was about work. Even when my credit card was mysteriously maxed out twice and he swore it must be fraud. Even when Daisy started refusing to eat whenever he was home. "Something's off about him," Natalie said over wine one night while Marcus was in Dubai. Or Switzerland. I could never keep track. "Have you met any of his friends? His family? Where did he go to school?" "You're being paranoid," I said, refilling her glass. "He went to Harvard. His parents died in a car accident when he was 20. And he's met all of you. Who met him?" There's a difference. But I was 34 years old. My biological clock was ticking like a time bomb, and I had a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine telling me he wanted to give me everything. So I pushed down the doubts, ignored my dog's weird behavior, and said yes when he proposed on our 1-year anniversary with a ring that must have cost 6 figures. "Before we get married," he said that night, still on one knee, "I need to tell you something. My work, it's complicated. There might be times when I need you to sign things without asking questions. Times when I need you to trust me completely. Can you do that?" Of course, I breathed, blinded by the diamond and the promise of forever. I trust you with my life. If only I'd known I was trusting him with so much more than that. My dad flew in from Seattle 2 weeks before the wedding. He'd been lukewarm about Marcus from the start, which hurt because my dad's opinion meant everything to me. He'd raised me alone after mom died, and even though his job with the federal government meant he traveled constantly throughout my childhood, he'd never missed a birthday, a graduation, or a broken heart. I want to take you both to lunch, Dad said over the phone. Get to know my future son-in-law better. Marcus tried to get out of it, claimed he had a conference call with Tokyo, then a migraine, then a client emergency. But Dad wouldn't budge, and eventually Marcus ran out of excuses. We met at Chez Laurent, the same restaurant where Marcus had taken me on our first date. I thought it would be romantic. Looking back, I think Marcus chose it because he knew the exits. Dad was already waiting when we arrived, sitting with his back to the wall like he always did. Occupational hazard, he used to joke, though he'd never told me exactly what his occupation was. Government consulting was all he'd ever say. Robert, Marcus said, extending his hand with that $1,000,000 smile. Great to finally spend some real time together. Dad shook his hand, studying Marcus's face with an intensity that made me shift in my seat. Likewise, Sophia tells me you work in international finance? That's right, mostly private equity these days. Interesting. Which firm? I'm independent, started my own company a few years back. Dad nodded slowly, never breaking eye contact. Must be successful. That's quite a ring you gave my daughter. The waiter came by with menus, but Dad waved him off. We'll need a few minutes. The interrogation started subtle. Dad asked about Marcus's education, his previous work experience, where he grew up. Marcus answered smoothly, but I noticed he was gripping his water glass a little too tight. You said you went to Harvard? Dad pressed. What year did you graduate? 2012. MBA. Funny, I have a colleague whose son graduated from Harvard Business the same year. Small program. He might know you. What was your concentration? Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Finance and entrepreneurship. But I kept to myself mostly, focused on my studies. The questions kept coming, each one more specific than the last. What banks did he work with? Which clients? Who were his references? Marcus deflected each one with practiced ease, but sweat was beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. Dad, I finally interjected, embarrassed by the third degree. This isn't a job interview. Can we please just have a nice lunch? Of course, sweetheart. Dad smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm just curious about the man who's marrying my only daughter. You understand, don't you, Marcus? Absolutely, Marcus said, but his knuckles were white around his fork. The rest of the meal passed in tense small talk. Marcus excused himself to the bathroom twice, and the second time, Dad leaned across the table. How well do you really know this man, Sophia? Dad, please, not now. I'm serious. Something's not right. You're being overprotective. You've been weird about every guy I've dated since high school. This is different. His voice was low, urgent. Trust me on this. But I didn't want to trust him. I wanted to trust the man I was going to marry in 2 weeks. The man who made me feel alive and desired and chosen. When Marcus returned, Dad was writing something on his napkin. I assumed he was calculating the tip, eager to end this awkward lunch. But as we stood to leave, he slid the napkin across the table to me. 5 words in his careful handwriting. You'll thank me one day. I crumpled it up, mortified. Dad, stop. Whatever weird game you're playing, just stop. But he wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring at Marcus with an expression I'd never seen before, like a hunter who'd just spotted his prey. It was enlightening to finally meet you properly, Dad said, emphasizing the last word strangely. I'm sure we'll be seeing each other again very soon. Marcus's face had gone pale. Looking forward to it. In the parking lot, Marcus was silent until Dad's rental car disappeared around the corner. Then he exploded. What the hell was that? Your father treating me like a criminal? I'm so sorry, I soothed, rubbing his arm. He's just protective. He'll warm up after the wedding. He better, Marcus muttered. Then forcing a smile. Hey, I need to fly to London tonight. Last-minute client emergency. I'll be back in 3 days. But we have the cake tasting tomorrow. I know, baby. I'm sorry. This deal is huge for us. For our future. He kissed me hard, desperately. I love you. Never doubt that. He was gone within an hour, leaving me with a crumpled napkin and a dog who finally came out from under the bed. Dad called me that night. We need to talk. If this is about lunch, I don't want to hear it. Sophia, listen to me. The man you're engaged to, I don't think he's who he says he is. Based on what? A weird feeling? Based on 25 years of investigating financial crimes for the federal government. The words hit me like cold water. You're a federal investigator? Retired, technically, but yes. And your fiancé. I've seen him before. Different name, different story, but same face, same eyes. You're wrong. My voice was shaking. You're confused. Marcus went to Harvard. He has his own company. Have you ever seen his diploma? Met his colleagues? Visited his office? The questions hung in the air like accusations. Because the truth was, I hadn't. Every time I'd suggested visiting his office, he'd said he worked from home or client sites. His diploma was in storage. His colleagues were always traveling. Dad, please. You're scaring me. Good. You should be scared. I need you to do something for me. Check his laptop. Look for any documents with different names. And Sophia, don't let him know you suspect anything. I hung up on him, threw my phone across the room, startling poor Daisy. This was insane. My father was paranoid, seeing criminals everywhere because of his job. Marcus wasn't perfect, but he wasn't a con artist, was he? That night, I couldn't sleep. Every memory replayed with a different filter. The way he'd shown up bleeding at my door, how he always paid cash, how he'd convinced me to add him to my bank accounts for emergencies. The 2 times my credit cards had been maxed out. At 3 a.m., I crept to his home office. His laptop was there, closed but not locked. My hands shook as I opened it. His email was open. The inbox was full of messages from names I didn't recognize, discussing wire transfers and account numbers. But it was the sent folder that made my blood run cold. Dozens of emails to different women. Photos attached. The same photos he'd sent me when we first started dating. The same words. The same promises. My guardian angel. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. This deal is going to set us up for life, baby. Trust me. But the worst part, the emails were signed with different names. Marcus Wellington, Michael Winters, Matthew Williams. I was going to be sick. Daisy whined from the doorway, and I realized I was crying. Sobbing, actually. The kind of ugly crying that makes your whole body shake. Who had I been sleeping next to for 2 years? Who was I about to marry? My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus landed safe. Missing you already. Can't wait to make you my wife. I barely made it to the bathroom before I threw up. I called Dad at dawn. You were right. I'm on my way. He was at my door within an hour, along with a woman in a severe black suit, who introduced herself as Special Agent Chen. Miss Morrison, I know this is difficult, she said, sitting across from me at my kitchen table while Daisy pressed against my legs. But we need your help. The man you know as Marcus Wellington is actually named Martin Walsh. He's wanted in connection with multiple fraud schemes across 3 states. She spread photos across my table. Marcus at different ages, with different women, all wearing the same besotted expression I'd seen in my own mirror. He targets successful women. Agent Chen continued. Gains their trust, their love, then their financial information. By the time they realize what's happened, he's gone with their savings, their credit, and sometimes their businesses. But I'm not rich. I protested weakly. You have excellent credit, own this condo outright, and have a successful marketing firm. Plus you were lonely, recently out of a relationship, working too much to date. You were perfect. Each word was a knife. Because she was right. I'd been so desperate to be loved that I'd ignored every warning sign. What do you need me to do? Dad took my hand. He doesn't know we're on to him. When he comes back, act normal. We'll be watching. We need to catch him in the act of fraud, to make the charges stick. You want me to pretend everything's fine? Pretend I still love him. Just for a few days, Agent Chen assured me. We'll have agents nearby at all times. You'll be safe. Safe. I almost laughed. I hadn't been safe since the moment I'd opened my door to a bleeding stranger. Marcus called that afternoon, and somehow I kept my voice steady. Told him I missed him. Couldn't wait for the wedding. The lies tasted like ash in my mouth. Actually, he said, I need you to do something for me. There's a document in my office, in the blue folder. I need you to sign it and overnight it to my hotel. It's for the London deal. What kind of document? Just a formality. Power of attorney stuff. You trust me, right? There it was. The final play. I found the document right where he said it would be. It would give him complete control over my finances, my company, everything. Of course I trust you. I lied. I'll send it today. Agent Chen was ecstatic. This is it. Sign it, but we'll intercept the package. When he comes back expecting to have control of your assets, we'll arrest him. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I went to work, smiled at concerned friends, finalized wedding details I knew would never happen. Natalie could tell something was wrong, but I couldn't risk telling her. Not yet. Daisy was my only comfort, staying by my side constantly as if she knew I was falling apart. I'd bury my face in her golden fur and sob, until I couldn't breathe. How had I been so stupid, so blind? But then I'd remember the way he'd looked at me that first night. The desperation in his eyes hadn't been fake. He'd needed me to save him. I just hadn't realized he'd needed saving from himself. Marcus came home on a Thursday. I heard his key in the lock, and my whole body went rigid. Daisy immediately retreated to the bedroom. Baby, I'm home. He swept in with roses and champagne, pulling me into his arms. God, I missed you. His lips on mine made me want to scrub my skin raw, but I forced myself to melt into him. 3 federal agents were in a van outside. Dad was in the coffee shop across the street. I just had to play the part a little longer. I missed you too, I whispered, hating how easily the lie came. How was London? Profitable. He grinned, setting down the champagne. Did you send that document? Of course. Overnight express, just like you asked. That's my girl. He kissed my forehead, and I fought not to flinch. Once that goes through, we'll be set. We can move anywhere you want. Paris? Tokyo? The world is ours, baby. The world built on other women's broken dreams and empty bank accounts. Actually, I said, pulling away slightly, my dad wants to have dinner with us tonight. To apologize for lunch the other day. His smile faltered. Tonight? I'm exhausted from the flight. Please? He feels terrible. He even made reservations at that new steakhouse downtown. 8 o'clock. I watched him calculate, weighing the risk against the need to maintain his cover. Fine. But if he starts interrogating me again, he won't. I promise. The rest of the afternoon was agony. Marcus showered and changed, talking excitedly about our honeymoon plans, while I nodded and smiled. He showed me pictures from London on his phone, careful to crop out anything identifying. I wondered which woman had taken them. Which mark he'd been working while I'd been signing away my life. At 7:30 we headed downtown. Marcus held my hand in the car, thumb stroking my palm in a gesture that used to make me melt. Now it made me nauseous. After dinner, I want to show you something, he said. A surprise for our wedding night. Can't wait, I managed. The restaurant was crowded, perfect for what was about to happen. Dad was already at our table, along with Agent Chen posing as his date. Marcus tensed when he saw her, but Dad stood with a welcoming smile. Marcus, so glad you could make it. This is my friend Linda from work. We sat down, Marcus positioning himself with his back to the entrance. Amateur mistake. The old Marcus, the one who'd bled on my doorstep, would have known better. I owe you an apology, Dad began, pouring wine. I was out of line at lunch. Sophia's happiness is all that matters to me. I appreciate that, Robert. Marcus relaxed slightly. I know you're just looking out for her. Exactly. Which is why I have a wedding gift for you both. Dad reached into his jacket, and I saw Marcus's hand twitch toward his pocket. I want to pay for your honeymoon. Anywhere you want to go. That's very generous. Marcus's eyes darted between Dad and Agent Chen. But unnecessary. I insist. In fact, I already put down a deposit on a villa in Tuscany. Unless you'd prefer somewhere else. Maybe Switzerland? I hear you travel there often for work. The color drained from Marcus's face. How did you? Oh, I have my sources. Dad smiled, all teeth. In fact, I was talking to an old colleague about you. He remembered a fascinating case from a few years back. A man who convinced 3 women in Miami to invest in a fake cryptocurrency. Looked just like you. Different name, of course. Marcus stood abruptly. I need to use the restroom. Sit down, Martin. The name hit him like a physical blow. He looked at me, those green eyes wide with betrayal. Sophia? I know everything, I said quietly. The other women, the fraud, the lies, all of it. For a moment his mask slipped completely. I saw rage, then calculation, then something that might have been regret. But before he could speak, Agent Chen stood up. Martin Walsh, you're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. The restaurant erupted as agents flooded in. Marcus tried to run, but they were ready. He was on the ground in seconds, hands cuffed behind his back. Sophia, he called out as they hauled him up. I loved you. That was real. I wanted to believe him. Some sick part of me still wanted to believe that somewhere in all those lies, there had been a grain of truth. But then I remembered the emails. The other women with my same story, my same heartbreak. No, I said, standing on shaking legs. You loved what I could give you. There's a difference. They dragged him out, still shouting my name. The restaurant slowly returned to normal, diners pretending they hadn't just witnessed my life imploding. Dad wrapped his arms around me as I finally broke down. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. I feel so stupid. I sobbed into his chest. You're not stupid. You're human. You wanted to love and be loved. He took advantage of that. Agent Chen approached, her professional mask softening. You did great, Miss Morrison. Your testimony will help us put him away for a long time. And there's something else. She handed me a card. We've been tracking his assets, money he stole from other victims. There's a process, but we might be able to recover some of it. Return it to the women he hurt. I thought about those emails, those other versions of me, crying into their own dog's fur, wondering how they'd been so blind. I want to help, I said. Whatever you need, I want to help them all. The trial took 8 months. 8 months of testimony, of facing him across a courtroom, of learning just how deep his deceptions ran. 12 women came forward in total. Nurses, teachers, lawyers, executives, all successful, all lonely, all taken for everything they had. Marcus, or Martin, or whatever his real name was, got 15 years. During the trial, I learned the truth about that first night. He hadn't been hit by a car. He'd been running from a deal gone bad. Chose my building because it had security cameras he could use for an alibi. The blood was real, but the wound was self-inflicted. He'd studied me for weeks, knew I worked late, knew I'd be alone, knew I'd help. Even our meet cute was a con. But something beautiful came from the wreckage. The other women and I formed a support group. We met monthly, sharing our stories, our healing, our journey back to trusting ourselves. Some were further along than others. Sarah from Miami was engaged again, this time to a man whose background she'd thoroughly checked. Linda from Phoenix had started a nonprofit to educate women about romance scams. And me? I threw myself into work, into therapy, into loving the one creature who'd tried to warn me from the start. Daisy became a certified therapy dog, and we visited women's shelters together, sharing our story of survival. Natalie stuck by me through it all, though she never let me forget that she'd called it from the beginning. I'm just saying, she'd tease over wine, maybe next time trust the best friend and the dog. Dad and I grew closer than ever. He finally told me about his real job, the cases he'd worked, the criminals he'd caught. You're the strongest person I know, he said one day over coffee. You faced him down, you helped bring him to justice. You survived. I had help, I reminded him. We all need help sometimes. The trick is being smart enough to take it. A year after the trial, I was finally starting to feel like myself again. My credit was slowly recovering, my business was thriving, and I'd even been on a few dates. Nothing serious, but progress. Then I got the call. Miss Morrison, this is Agent Chen. I have news about Martin Walsh. My blood ran cold. Did he escape? No, nothing like that. But we've recovered additional funds from an offshore account. Nearly $2 million. It's being divided among his victims. Your share would be about $150,000. I sank onto my couch, Daisy immediately jumping up beside me. Money he'd stolen from other women, now coming back to help us rebuild. It felt like poetic justice. There's more. Agent Chen continued. We found evidence of additional victims in Canada. Your testimony will help prosecute him there too. He's never getting out, Sophia. You did that. You stopped him. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. Daisy rested her head on my lap, brown eyes full of the unconditional love I'd been searching for in all the wrong places. My phone buzzed, a text from a number I didn't recognize. Hi Sophia, my name is Claire. Agent Chen gave me your number. I'm one of Martin's victims from Toronto. I just wanted to say thank you. You saved my life. He was days away from taking everything when you caught him. Thank you for being brave enough to stop him. I cried then, not the broken sobs of betrayal, but cleansing tears of closure. Marcus had been wrong about one thing. I hadn't saved him that night. He showed up bleeding on my doorstep. I'd saved myself. And in the end I'd saved others too. And that's why you should always trust your dog's instincts about people. I concluded, looking out at the audience of college women. They see what we can't, when we're blinded by love. The auditorium erupted in applause. I'd been doing these talks for 2 years now, traveling to universities to share my story. Each time got a little easier, the shame a little less sharp. Afterward, a young woman approached me, tears in her eyes. My boyfriend has been asking me to add him to my bank account. Something felt off, but I thought I was being paranoid. After hearing your story, I think I need to ask more questions. Trust your gut, I told her, and maybe get a dog. She laughed through her tears and hugged me. These moments made it all worth it. Every humiliating revelation, every painful testimony, every night I'd wondered if I'd ever trust again. Outside, Dad was waiting by the car with Daisy, now gray around the muzzle, but still my faithful companion. Great talk, sweetheart. Your mom would be so proud. Thanks for believing in me, I said, scratching Daisy's ears. For seeing what I couldn't. That's what fathers do. We protect our daughters, even when they think they don't need it. As we drove home, I thought about the napkin he'd slid across that restaurant table. 5 words that had saved my life. You'll thank me one day. He'd been right. I thanked him every single day, because sometimes the greatest love story isn't about finding someone who completes you. Sometimes it's about finding the strength to complete yourself. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it's about having a father who loves you enough to see the truth when you can't, and a dog wise enough to growl at the monsters hiding behind beautiful masks. Marcus had promised me the world. In the end, he'd given me something better. He'd given me myself back, and that was worth more than all the roses and champagne and lying promises in the world. Final words from me, your narrator. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Trust your instincts, trust your dog, and always trust the people who love you enough to tell you hard truths. Share this story if it resonated with you. You never know who might need to hear it. And remember, the right person will never ask you to sign something without reading it first. Stay smart, stay strong, and stay single until someone proves they're worth your trust. Because you're worth more than someone's con. You're worth real love. The kind that doesn't come with hidden agendas and offshore accounts. You've got this.